Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this latest edition of Coaching Conversations. So good to have a number of you here again, some familiar faces, some familiar names. I'm really looking forward to tonight's topic, skill acquisition. For me, really enjoy talking about skill acquisition. First learned about it during university a number of years ago, and I was really pleased when we were looking at the topics for Coaching Conversations. I chatted with Jack, and one of the things that came up was skill acquisition. So welcome again. As I just mentioned, the guest tonight is Jack Humphreys, talent development coach for mountain bike, which I'll hand over to you shortly. But just in case anybody hasn't been here before, in terms of the format of Coaching Conversations. So it is an interactive session. It is a conversation. So please do use the chat, share your experience, share your ideas. And later you'll have the opportunity to go into a breakout room to discuss, contextualize the information that Jack's going to present and that we're going to talk about. And tonight we're also going to have a little go. If you received the email earlier, you'll have seen that we're also going to have a little go at Jamboard and creating some skill continuums. And who knows if that's going to work or not? We'll have a look later. But it's all good. So just before we get going, because there's a few things we're going to talk about tonight. I'm just going to launch a couple of really quick polls just to see kind of where we're at in terms of challenging riders. So we're talking about skill and developing skill, and we're going to talk a little bit about challenge point coaching and the zone of proximal development and how we progress it or we ease off. So just a couple of questions that are basically the same. The first one's in kind of lower ability riders. I just want to understand, how confident do you feel offering a challenge to lower ability riders? And that challenge could be anything, just a way to improve, something that you noticed, helping them out, something that lower ability or less experienced riders might be aware of. So results coming in. Hopefully you can see on your screen the opportunity to take part in the poll. So I think we've got 85% of the vote there, 92%, good stuff. So we'll end that. And I'll share the results to say, challenging lower ability riders, people feel quite confident, which is great to see. Okay, I'm going to launch the next poll, which is about higher ability riders, and it's the same question. I'll give a little bit of an explanation afterwards about why I'm interested in this. Okay, we've got around about 80% of the vote. Okay, so I'm just going to close that there. I'm going to share the results. So as you can see, we go from lower ability riders, feeling pretty confident. The majority of the group pretty confident. We go to higher ability riders, feeling somewhat confident, down to not confident. That really echoes my experience as a coach. So for awareness, I used to work in a football academy for a number of years. Talented kids, but I always felt that I was kind of batting towards the bottom end of the group, and I was supporting them a lot, because it's quite obvious when someone can't do something that the rest of the group can do, and you want to dive in and help them. And sometimes maybe the more talented riders were missing out. And I think this is where Jack is really going to give some hopefully some really interesting insight into how we think about challenging the top end of the group. So Jack, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna keep on admitting people. There's still a few people arriving, which is great to see. So welcome if you just joined us, and I'm gonna hand over to Jack. So welcome, Jack. You need to come off mute.
Oh, hi, thanks for that, Robbie. So I'm Jack. I'm the talent coach for mountain biking, and this is me on some pictures. I used to race cyclocross. So should we flick to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about my role. So this is the talent pathway, and my role, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but my role sits in the first kind of shaded section here. So the mountain bike pathway is the lighter green one, and it goes from development centers and DC through to RSRs, through to the N, which is NSRs, and then into D, which is the development squad. And that's where it ends. So overall, my role is to simply provide riders who are ready to step onto the junior development squad. We do that through three main areas: development centers, which we spoke about just before, and that's mainly in the clubland area. So a lot of club coaches on the call probably work in those there. The next is on the RSR program. The RSR is where we bring them in. We have big groups of about 20 to maybe 30, and we work on some riding stuff, some in-classroom session, and working predominantly on kind of race tactics, things like that. Next is the NSR. We take a smaller group of about 20 riders and just take it to that next level. So working on more technical stuff, more of a one-to-one basis, and the riders are encouraged to take a lot more control of what they do. So that's a general overview of what I do and the pathway, really.
So I will assume that people are aware of the pathway, and if you did receive the email before, I did share the talent pathway handbook. So this is in there, so you can kind of scrutinize it. And I guess one of the things just to emphasize for tonight is that even though we're talking about talent, you know, the reason we have Jack on and we're talking about skill acquisition, you know, it interests us both, but also thinking about how do you challenge those top end riders. But the principles of developing skill is consistent, even you know, working at grassroots or whichever rider you're working with, that we're their coaches to try and, you know, develop the skill and the ability and the competence and confidence of these athletes. So when Jack's talking about these things and you know, these progressions, it's really to keep in mind, how is this going to work for you in your context? I'll pop you on the next slide.
So this is something that's again in the talent handbook, and it's just a bit of a helping page of progressions for certain techniques, for example, starts. And the idea with this is for riders to not necessarily say this is where you should be at a certain level. It's they come on, read through the progressions, and wherever they currently are, it's about focusing on where the next step is. It's just a bit of a guide to help kind of riders push on through.
So Jack, just going to ask, the columns, is this still the case that the columns are the towards the podiums, kind of the top, like the skills that the podium athletes would expect to, and the kind of towards where the title is more towards like the talent pathway? Is that correct?
Yeah. So the left hand side is the easier elements of the skill. So you'd start off essentially there and work your way through, progressively getting harder from left to right. We tend not, like I said, we don't tie that to certain sections of the pathway. So at RSR, you shouldn't be expected to be in the first column, then NSR, the next column. And it's about rider progression going from where they currently are to where the next step is, rather than tying it to age, because there is no linear progression for talent and skill, etc.
That's great. So talk to us about skill then, Jack, you know, and about your approach to developing skill. I mean, we'll probably come back to a Q&A later. I hope there's going to be loads of questions for you, but talk to us, what do your sessions look like?
So yes, for me, it's probably a little bit different compared to a lot of the other disciplines. Mine's predominantly skill-based. So the way we build the sessions is we start off and we come in at RSR 1, and we really focus on the basics, on flat pedal stuff, really building that from day one all the way through to the end of the program. And each session that we do, we kind of try and add the next stage onto there, but there's always that element of the basics. So some of the things, for example, the challenges I find with talented athletes is I'm stood there and I'm trying to get them to go off some really scary high risk section, and that can be quite daunting for me as a coach as well as for a rider. As well as another challenge is getting those talented riders to go back and focus on the basic stuff. But that's what I find is quite key for developing talent, is if you can get a rider to really focus and dial in that basic skills that they need, it can help them with the more advanced stuff. So for me, developing skill, it's about getting a lot of variety, and when you do learn something, you just learn it really well. So doing your, say for example, wheelies, you're doing it in a flat car park, nice and easy. But as soon as you've kind of mastered that, you take it to the next stage. You go, can you do this on a bumpy terrain? Can you do this in a single track? Can you do this in a group and a bunch of people? So there's never a stage where we'll have a rider and we'll go, right, you've done wheelies, you've completed it. There's always just adding that next challenge, that next kind of progression to it. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully some of you managed to access the YouTube link that I sent out before around Zone of Proximal Development. So hopefully you saw a little the artwork drawn out, and some of the things that Jack's just mentioned really resonates in terms of, you know, finding that appropriate challenge point. So they don't think it's too hard or it's too easy, so they get bored, and then that scaffolding it up, and it's not a linear journey, scaffolding it up for the rider to you know, so they progress at their pace and with the appropriate skill level. So That's great, Jack. I think as an overview of what you do, that's absolutely great. And look, we're going to come back to Jack later. He's going to support with the skill continuum stuff, and there's obviously the opportunity to do Q&A. So just a reminder about the chat function. So chat is really valuable on these kind of calls. So please do pop questions in the chat or share your thoughts about what skill development looks like in your club and your coaching practice. That'd be really valuable to help everybody develop. So I'm just going to kind of dive into a little bit of the theory before we go on to our first task. So just to revisit, if people weren't able to watch the video before, I'm not sure how many of you were about the Zone of Proximal Development. It's talked about a lot in learning, in education, certainly on my degrees, which were more around sport coaching and sport development. It was taught a lot, and it was developed. So the idea was, it's probably not a new concept, but it was developed in 1978 by a guy called Vygotsky. And if you saw the video, you know that it's saying that if something's too easy, that they might get bored. A learner might get bored. And certainly some of the coaching conversations that we've had before have talked about dropout, losing riders early from as young as 12 years old, getting a bit bored, a bit disenfranchised with cycling. And then we start to think, that starts to pique my interest in, well, is it the activity? Is it the club? Is it just actually they've got different interests? What is it? But if we make the activity really exciting and make it really challenging, so they're coming to every session thinking what they're going to learn, they're going to be in their zone, and it's going to help them that little bit more. I'd be hopeful that would help things. The flip side of that is that beyond the zone of proximal development, where things are just too hard and they just think this is unachievable, I can't do it, I'm just not doing it, not today, not ever. I'm going to go and do something I can do, because people are good at things people like things that they're good at, and they're good at things that they like to do. So we need to make riders feel that they're good and they're progressing. And just you might have heard of the Zone of Proximal Development before. You might have heard of things like the sweet spot of learning, just that stretch point, or the learning zone. It's not, you can call it the learning zone. There's many different ways to learn, but the important thing is that we just don't want it too easy, and we don't want it too hard. We want to try and make sure it's in the right place. How do we do that though? So this is where we're going to get onto the continuums. But just to credit here that Curious Coaches is it's a golfing blog. When I went to start creating these graphs myself, and I was like, surely someone's done this. And I just like scoured the internet, and there was there's a thing. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with flow, but this is the idea that when you're absolutely absorbed in something that you're really good at and you're progressing, that you just have this feeling, you forget everything in the outside world. It's just it's just great to be doing the activity. But just on the left side is about that challenge level and that skill level. So obviously if you look at the axes, if their skill level is low, but the challenge level is high, then that's going to cause anxiety. Whereas if the skill level is high but the challenge level is low, that's going to cause boredom. So we need to make sure that the points that we're challenging riders is appropriate. But then we see, and this is where we're going to start talking about the continuum, just on the the optimal challenge point about that performance and task difficulty, is just getting it right, where the difficulty is just enough to start stretching their performance. And obviously, if the task difficulty is quite low, then the performance is going to be high. People can do the easy task again and again. But obviously, as the task difficulty gets higher, the performance might come down. We need to try and find where that absolute optimal point is to scaffold up that learning. So that's a little bit of the thing. We're not going to dive too much into the theory tonight, because this is just about hearing from you and about how you challenge riders and about what your thoughts are in terms of skill continuums, which we're going to jump onto now. Just to flag the next session, the next coaching conversation, we've actually got two academics on who are going to start talking a little bit more about the theoretical aspects of skill acquisition. So hopefully it's a really nice bridge between tonight and the next session. So I need to stop sharing my screen, just 1 second, and I'm going to dive onto the Jamboard. So you should have received the link earlier. If you were all signed up before around about 1 o'clock, then you should have seen the link to the Jamboard. So just dive on there, and we're going to have a go. I'm going to share it in the link again, just so you've got it. And right, good. I can see lots of people have tested things out again. Have tested that they can actually use it, which is great to see. So it's pretty straightforward. Let me just check that everybody's got it. Sorry, there's just a little bit of navigating. Jack, I could have done with somebody else tonight. Do you know what I mean? Like, so the link I've just posted in the chat about the Jamboard, and I will share my screen again. But obviously you'll be on it. So why is that? Brilliant. It's what? Why is my session disappeared? There we go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at a skill, and I'm going to look for suggestions from the group. But the idea, kind of based on what we've just talked about, I'm just going to delete these that are on here. Posting a sticky on a Jamboard. Yeah. Good stuff. Wheelies for the win. Good stuff. You never told me. So if you weren't able to test before, just note the panel on the left hand side. There's a little cursor arrow, and then just below that there's a sticky note. So click the sticky note. It brings up something that you can type in. So here's what we're going to do. Here's the challenge for you, just to see if this works. So I'm going to put on the most basic and obvious of tasks, and the first thing we're just going to have a look at. Okay, so I'm going to put pedaling in the middle of the screen. And what I want you to think about first is, how do we make pedaling easier? And then we're going to create a continuum based on your ideas. So once you've typed something in, pressed enter, you can just grab it and move it, because really annoyingly, all the post-its end up in the same place. So just have a go, post it. How do we make pedaling easier? So, okay, so good coaching points, pedal start position. Okay, so I will move that down there. Use a smooth level surface, smaller gear. Okay. Okay. Now, so just the thing about so gears is really good. So things like foot position and pedal start position, I think they're more coaching points than finding the challenge point. Unless if you're I think about my son who's 3 years old. He's pedaling really competently, but he does pretty much pedal on his heels. It's just one of those, keep on telling him about the ball of his foot and things, but he just keeps going. But he's actually happy riding his bike, so don't stretch it too much. So okay, so let's have a look. So saddle height for the rider. So making sure that's right. Slightly downhill, good. Okay, flat pedals with flat shoes. Okay, saddle height, good stuff. So these are really good. Easy gears or appropriate gear. That's good. So we've got some of this, similar stuff. So Jack, some suggestions. How would you make pedaling look better? I know we're talking about, novice riders here, not talented riders, but what other ideas would you say about making pedaling easier? Oil the system.
But yeah, a lot of this is good. I personally like going slightly downhill. So especially if you've got, say, on grass and it's quite a physical effort, it can be quite difficult. But if it's downhill and you don't have to pedal to actually move, you can really just the rider can just focus on the action and the motion of doing it. You can make it a bit easier. Yeah.
So if you think about how, if any of you doing like kind of balance bike activities or anything like that, I think the first part of pedaling, I think someone's got practice stamping. So that is before they even think about getting on a bike. And if you've seen Ready, Set, Ride, there is an activity in there called Stamp and Slide, where, practice that stamping and actually pushing down on the pedals. Practice jumping, because that's the motion of pushing down, and and lifting up essentially. So practice stamping. So we've got smaller gears going downhill. So let's think about making pedaling harder then. Okay, so same thing, and I'll try and organize this into some kind of continuum. So pedaling, how do we make pedaling harder? How are we going to start challenging riders who can just pedal normally? Okay, and hopefully we'll see quite a few ideas here. And I will just say, put a thing in. I'll tell you a little thing, because I know, stabilizers are demonized in kind of getting kids to ride now. And my son was always on a balance bike from a young age. And when we got him a pedal bike, he did the usual thing, like going down. He was going down a small hill, like kind of pushing up and down on the pedals, but his legs weren't coming around. He wasn't lifting over. And the breakthrough actually came for him to get the motion right. We went to go outdoors. and he jumped on a bike that was just in the shop, that was just like on the floor, and it had stabilizers, and he sat on and just went, "Go away, daddy." He's, you know, 3 years old, and he just started to almost like teach himself, and it was a strange moment for me, because kind of quite anti-stabilizers, you know, it's obviously not the best way to start, but it really helped him, and he's never looked back since, just on, you know, pedaling all the time, which is great. So, okay, some really right, great stuff. Okay, Jack, talk to me about the challenging the top end. Look at some of those. Anything you'd add, or any things that you like seeing there?
I like change the surface. That's a good one. Raise starts. Pedal one-legged is a good one, definitely. It mainly works if you've got clips, but
I've realised, you know, when I've done these jam boards before, we've done it with about 5 people, 30 people. It's going to be almost impossible to create a continuum like in a nice linear line. Okay, but they're really good to see. So the point of this is, and I'm sure you all do it, you're all experienced coaches. We've got level 1 coaches on the call tonight. We've got some level 3 coaches, which is great. The important thing is that you recognise that, you know, if somebody can pedal, that we start thinking about how do we challenge we don't just let them continue pedaling. Like, what can we do? Can we put them in a higher gear? Can we, you know, can we put them on a hill? Can we give them a race start? Can we make them, you know, pedal one-legged? Changing the surface. Jack, talk us about changing the surface, and maybe a bit about steps.
Yeah, I like changing the surface, because it makes a massive difference if the bike's moving underneath you, and depending on the surface, it can move differently. So if it's just like bumpy gravel, you've got to contend with all that pedaling technique that you've done, except your muscles have then got to absorb these bumps and work around all that. The same as if you've got slippy roots, is a really big one. Is your back wheel could slide 30 centimeters to the side without you having a chance to react. So having to then not only do the pedaling technique that you've been practicing, but then also do it whilst having to contend with all those other bits, really takes it to the next level, which I quite like.
Yeah, this is great. Look, just all the different ideas. So you think about just a simple skill like pedaling, and you can just you know, you can play with it loads. So what I would really like you to go away tonight is just to think about, you know, how you'd create your own continuums, and you might do this as like kind of a mind map, or think about things, but really thinking, how can we properly challenge riders even in just the basic skills? So right, Jack, give us another skill. So let's do this again. So we think about this as a process. Give me a skill.
Do my favourite one, wheelies.
Right, wheelies. Go on then. Okay, so same process. How do we make it easier? How do we make it? How do we make it easier to start off with? How would you start off teaching a wheelie? And I'll be honest, useless at wheelies. So whatever suggestions come tonight, I'm going out on the street tomorrow, and I'm having a go. So yeah, let's see some things coming on. Eyes front. Yeah. Again, I guess that's a coaching point rather than a challenge. So uphill is to make it easier. Does that make it easier?
Yeah.
Good. Glad you're here. Okay. So yeah, low gear. So again, thinking about those coaching points coming through. Is it actually low? We've got low gear, easy gear, harder gear. Which one's right, Jack?
Well, I always get confused what low and high gear means. I've never understood. So I go harder and easier. But I guess it's having the right gear, the Goldilocks gear, rather than harder ones. So you want enough resistance that you've got something to push against, but you don't want to be like struggling to kind of get that pedal stroke. It needs to be quite a good, quick pedal stroke with something to push against. Not really a definite answer there, but.
Okay, so what we're getting through now, I would say the gearing, having the pedal ready, and demonstrating. I would say they're coaching points rather than challenge points. So coaching point is kind of the performance of the technique. The challenge point is recognizing whether somebody can actually do the technique, and knowing how you ease off, or how you make it harder. So yeah, so lower the saddle. Yeah,
I'd say it's easier to make the wheelie harder than it is to make it easier, if that makes sense, because it's a tricky one to get in the first place. And I think if you're going to think about a certain area to kind of play with in terms of making it harder or easier, it'd be the environment. So not necessarily the techniques that they're doing, but the environment that you're doing it in.
Borrow your mates BMX, love it. Yeah. So to jump back, yeah. So this is when I've been kind of practicing kind of wheelies and bunny hop for cyclocross. We started kind of jumping off the back with 2 feet, bounce the front of the bike. Yeah. Okay. So Jack, in terms of a continuum, where would they go? So what would be kind of where would you start with a wheelie? What would be your starting point?
Mine would be just getting the wheel off the ground. So you can split that between using your power assisted lift, so your pedals, or bouncing the front wheel, or you doing a manual, throwing your weight back. So simply just getting that front wheel to leave the ground first. Okay. Then you can kind of progress it to start just probably more so like thinking about adding distance or pedal revolutions. So essentially getting yourself to that balance point. And as soon as you're getting comfortable on the balance point, then you can just keep adding distance.
Okay, so I guess one of the first things to start, I guess before lifting, you've got to obviously explain the the shift in the weight, so moving around the bike, so the kind of that motion of that you're aiming to achieve, and then obviously doing that motion, but lifting the front wheel off the bike, bouncing that, going to try and do it a little bit further, jumping off the back with 2 feet, and then walking the bike, feel the balance break. That actually might be first. Okay, so let's go again. Let's make it harder now. So how would we make wheelies harder? Yeah, so loads of good suggestions in terms of coaching points, in terms of that space to practice, in terms of demonstrating. You might want to use things like I did today, like with YouTube, popping around a video showing how to do a wheelie. So making it harder, going downhill. Hang on a minute, I've just realised I haven't put uphill on the... I'm actually trying to make a continuum this time. One hand wheelies. Jack, can you do a one-hand wheelie?
Just about.
What? Who needs that? Yeah, just showing off. So, okay. So add obstacles. Yeah, really, really good. Okay. I was going uphill. So look at this, just a single skill, and we start thinking about all these different ways we can challenge it. And you can imagine challenging different riders. So thinking about that differentiation, doing this in a single session. So see how long they can hold a wheelie for. Jack, do you know what it is in BMX, or what is it on your continuums?
The distance wise.
Distance and time, yeah.
For the good ones, it's when they run out of space. I usually have my measuring tape's 50 meters. So if they can do more than 50, I don't count it anymore. But really, so for me, what it is first of all, you get the distance. So they start getting in a straight line, and as soon as they get to 50 meters, I'm then focusing on how good's the quality. So can you do it whilst slaloming in and out? Can you do it in a circle? Can you come to a stop on your back wheel and then set off again without dropping your front wheel? So for me, especially for say the NSR riders, I don't want to see them just being able to ride a wheelie at 50 meters in a straight line. That for me, that's the start of being able to do a wheelie. What's really important is the step after that. So that's why it's a lot easier to make it more difficult to wheelie than it is to make it easier.
Yeah,
it's never ending.
I was going clearly, I'm looking at things and I'm thinking there's not actually that many coaching points when we're making it harder. There's quite a lot of challenge in there, which is great to see. So really, great group of coaches online tonight, really thinking about that challenge point, which is good to see. So, okay, so let's have a look. So manuals, is that easier to, is that easier? Sorry, that makes it harder, or how would you weave? Because I understand the separate skills.
I guess technically it's not a wheelie, but it's a kind of a blurred line, because you could do a wheelie and then hit the balance point and not pedal, and then are you manualing or not? I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer for that one. It's definitely more difficult, but I don't know if it's quite a wheelie.
We've gone full on to bike ballet. We've got wheelies in pairs, holding hands, doing circles. So that's like the ultimate. I love that, and I love the suggestion to Sagana. I mean, that is the ultimate, wheelie master. Right. Let's have it. Let's see if we've got some different discipline coaches from the group. So if you've got a skill that you'd like to see how the group would make easier or harder, just give a shout out, and the first one I hear we'll try next. Don't be shy. Come on. I don't think. Oh, sorry. Put it in the chat because I've realised that I've got to unmute you. So whichever the first one is a chat. Loving the BMX focus. It's actually an MTB focus, I'm afraid, Nathaniel. But we'll call it BMX for you. So roller skill range. Roller skills. We've got a course on that, so we'll leave that. So rain jacket. Okay, so that's actually a really pertinent one. Do you know what? When me and Jack started talking about this, so if you can flick across the top slide to slide 3, we'll have rain jacket, because this is really relevant for many disciplines, but it's really relevant because of the Grand Tours in the autumn. The riders that really struggled seem to lose a little bit of time. So we'll do rain jacket. Okay. And actually, if you have done the rollers course, there is something in there about the rain jacket. So go on then. Putting your rain jacket on and off. Okay, I will say putting on a rain jacket. It's a specific. Okay, how do you make that easier? Start with yeah. Good suggestion. I wouldn't. Yeah. Downhill. Good. So yeah, start with a gilet or short sleeve. Yeah, good stuff. Warm hands. Yeah. So I guess some of these might not necessarily be a continuum, but might just be ideas to progress with. And I don't know if anybody follows Oakland Wolves. They're a college cycling academy down in Hertfordshire. And they posted a video. It was I think it was Oakland Wolves, or it was Jez Cox who leads the program there. And they had a race. So they used the Wellwyn. I can't remember what it's called now. The velodrome that's down there. And they had a challenge where they started on a track. All the riders started with a track stand thing in the back pocket. They had to take it out, put the jacket on, and then it was a sprint to the finish. That's quite an interesting way to do it, and on a velodrome as well, where possibly wouldn't ordinarily need one. So. Good stuff. Right. Really, really good suggestions coming in. Jack, would you add anything to that in terms of making it easier other than what's on the screen?
I'd maybe just, I don't know if this is too easy, but practice not on the bike. But I guess they can all do that as a starting point.
Yeah. So on the turbo, just the feel of pedaling and doing it. Obviously, you might not get the balance that you really want to develop on there. So on the turbo, feet on the ground. Yeah. Okay. Timed. See how quickly you can do it. Okay. So same again. Make it harder. How do we make putting on a rain jacket harder? So yeah, I really like the suggestion for making it easier. Just to first practice riding no hands. That's got to be the starting point before you decide to do anything else without your hands. Use the similar. I don't. Who's their kit made by? Is it particularly tight or bad zips or something like that? But so in the wind, right? Yeah, good. Take it on and off again. So I specifically put. I specifically put putting on the jacket, tie the sleeves. Do it with your eyes closed. Not sure we should advocate that with riding. Remember, you are covered by British Cycling's insurance for coaches, leaders, and instructors, so do be careful. But it might be a way to challenge the absolute top end riders. Yeah, with thick gloves, or the challenge could be to take off the gloves, get the jacket out, put it on, put the gloves back on, take the gloves off, everything in reverse. Brilliant. Okay, so these are absolutely fantastic in terms of skill development. I'd appreciate. I'm actually seeing, enjoying watching these develop, but I appreciate we haven't all got all night to do this and, done it for a little while. What I really encourage you to do, though, if you're based at a club and you're with a group of coaches or you've got a community, take a single skill and really think about you know, what are the steps to make it easier? And, you know, what's the absolute starting point for someone that comes new to the coaching session? And how do we make it harder? And how would you challenge the absolute top end? So we've looked at 3 skills: wheelies, putting on a rain jacket, and pedaling. And absolutely tons of ideas on here. And I would look at that and go, there really isn't any, you know, any reason really. I know you'd be coaching riders week on week, but there isn't really why anybody should be getting bored if we can take this, you know, kind of approach of just trying to find that right challenge point and thinking creatively. Great creativity here. So Jack, just in terms of putting on a jacket, because I remember this is one of the first conversations we had kind of around skill acquisition. I was interested to hear your take on it. So take us through, you know, your practice and where you've challenged riders in taking a jacket on and off.
Well, it's not massively relevant for mountain biking because they don't tend to change the jacket in. But what I would say is, I think that it's on there somewhere. It's put in race scenarios. I think that's probably the best way to make it more challenging. Is put them, especially for road racing, is put you with riders around you, because it's all well and good being able to be nice and relaxed to go non-handed, take your jacket off when you've got space. But as soon as you know you've only got 20 centimeters either side of you to play with, the pressure really gets on, and that's when you really start to challenge the skill, I'd say.
And I specifically remember you saying about the doing it with a group of people around you and kind of shouting and trying to put you off.
Oh yeah. So for example, I'll do a jacket example. So if you were to learn to put your jacket on in a nice relaxed environment on your own, just nice and casual, you can get it dialed really well, nice and happy. But as soon as people are watching you and you put that pressure on, it starts to kind of like distract you. So if you've learned a skill in one way and you kind of learn the normal pathway in the skill in that kind of way, and as soon as you have these other people clapping, it again, without repeating myself, it distracts you neurologically, fires different neurons in your head, so that it starts to like it's harder to kind of do that skill that you've just done. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, so I found this really interesting. And I guess the thing is that I bet and none of the riders in the Grand Tours didn't know how to put on a jacket, and they hadn't done it before. It's just when, you know, the races were heating up, they're getting to the top of the climb, they're absolutely knackered, there's, you know, hundreds of fans screaming in the faces, and then the skill starts to fall apart. It feels a little bit different. And I just thought it was really interesting that, you know, and this is something that I spoke to Joe Malik about it afterwards as well. He was like, yeah, we train that from a very, very early age. We do it on rollers. You know, it's in the talent sessions as well. They have to do it in a bunch. You'll hopefully see the videos on Twitter. I think it's really, you know, essential that, you know, if you do, you know, you might be working at grassroots, which is absolutely great. But if you're working with talented riders, they're going to be in pressured situations, that you do the skill under pressure. So yeah, I just thought it was really interesting taking one of those skills and applying a load of pressure around it. So give them a radio and shout in their ear at the same time.
It's quite relevant for mountain biking, that, because you tend to find the crowds are go and gather where the more difficult technical parts are. So like these riders spend most days of the year on their own practicing these technical bits, and they're not going to get a crowd that big until they're on the most high pressured race of their life with 100, 200 people staring and cheering at them. So yeah, it's definitely important to practice in that kind of environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not going to focus on a skill now. We're just going to focus on that, you know, find that challenge point. So what I want you to think about is taking the practice or taking that skill development. We've managed to challenge them, but then how do we, you know, take someone who's finding a session overall too challenging? You might be going into kind of racing scenarios. What are suggestions for kind of making things easier? For the person, you know, finding that zone that's really going to, you know, keep them with us, make sure they're not too put off. What are some of the ideas for making an overall session easier for a rider? Okay, so not focusing on a specific skill. So rider, okay, yeah. I've got some, you know, my kids have got those, you know, little ponies that you ride on. That you stick between, what are they called? Hobby horses. Yeah. So. And I'll give you an example of something that I'd think about, you know, and I think about, you know, somebody's, you know, you might have a 12-year-old who's just really struggling, you know, new to the sessions, and find it too hard against the other 12-year-olds, always at the back, having an absolutely miserable time. Could you drop them an age group, you know, right? You know, just explain that, you know, you want them to have some success, make the races competitive. Could you drop them an age group? And you can obviously think from that what the reverse of that might be. So if you have the opportunity to do that, if it's not complete wide range of ages already in the session, and there's a younger session you can drop them to, make it so they can actually go somewhere and achieve it. Find that challenge point for them. So I'm going to put that one on. So we're just going to capture kind of some last thoughts and ideas about this idea of making things easier or harder. Okay, so I've got drop an age group, break group down into subgroups. Yeah, absolutely. So pairing riders, like bio-banding, like so thinking there might be two 12-year-olds, but one could be 6 foot and one could be 3.5. So making sure that they're competing against someone of the same physical size. Brilliant. We've got someone drawing on the screen. Smaller group coaching, yeah, a bit of one-to-one, so really focus on that. And I guess just the thing to go back to, the start when we did that first poll around that, taking care of those lower riders, lower ability riders, is we can always recognize that. We can always recognize when someone needs that support. The challenge for the coach is obviously making sure that the higher skilled riders aren't left alone, because we want to keep them with us in cycling. So changing to single gender groups, not specific age groups, that might be necessary. I think when we had the coaching conversations, one about women and girls, a lot of people were saying it happens around about 12, 13, 14, when the boys start to become a little bit more competitive and physiology starts taking over. But yeah, if that's one of those things, to change it so it's girls v girls, boys v boys, absolutely. So yeah, but buddy up with another better rider, like that. So and that's a way you can look at, say, flipped coaching, get the stronger riders to coach the weaker rider, and go from there. So find a game which practices a part of the skill, and you could set up circuits so it's not maybe so obvious what their skill level and ability is. Cool. Okay. So there's loads of ways we can make it easier. Okay. Hide the skill inside the game. So slide 4 is still going to be open, and then slide 5, there isn't any comments about bunny hops now, so that's progression. We're going to look at harder. So how can you make it so you've got a real talented kid in your session, you're wondering how to make things harder, making sure that they're appropriately challenged. What would you do as a coach? Many things you could do, but let's get some ideas here. We want to make sure those talented riders have got that challenge point. So increase the speed. Yeah, okay. Good. Ask them what they would do. Great shout. Great shout. So keep them coming, keep moving them around. I'm just going to check the chat. Cool. I just noticed a load of okay, sorry, they're the shouldering, rear wheel, left, riding a rut. Okay, yeah. Loads of different skills. So just if you check out the chat and like some of the different skills to develop, they might be ones you want to take away and think about your own continuums and making harder or easier. Cool. Lengthen the session. Yeah, that extra little bit of practice time, maybe on that one-to-one basis where you're going to really go and challenge them. Great shout. So yeah, so we've got some speed variations here. Jack, what would you do? I imagine, even though we're talking your role, talking with the talent pathway, even within that group, you're going to know who the lower end of that particular talented group is and who the higher end of that. What are some of the ways that you look to challenge those riders?
Well, a lot of these, I would do a lot of this stuff. So this, especially playing around with the speed. You could also do a lot of the stuff I do is whatever skill we're working on, then simply adding people around you, that extra pressure of having people in the way, maybe a race environment, pressure of trying to get to the line, as well as you could also add fatigue. So if you're doing, let's say, pumping, you're not just going to go and run down this nice rolly section. You're going to have like a sprint up a hill first, so that you're going into it absolutely blowing, there's lactic acid all over, and then you're having to do and perform those skills at the same time. So there's all sorts that you can do, really.
Do you know what? I've seen one on here that was that we always used to do the skill in an interval session whilst they are panting. It's such a good shout that some of the skills that they'll have to do is when they're absolutely in the red. And if they haven't practiced doing the skills in the red, again, just what you went back to before, it feels different. It's a really good point. So if you are doing interval sessions, you're doing, HIIT sessions, or you're doing it at home, right, on your bike, on the rollers, get the rain jacket out. Let's start practicing that. You know, when you're absolutely blowing and, you know, the hips are rocking and, you know, you're not feeling like you can do it. It's a really good shout. Combining skills as well. I love that. You know, it's potentially quite easy to think about, you know, say football or, you know, kind of games of the ball, like challenge, you know, linking up different kind of skills. But think about it on a bike, all the different kind of skills challenges that are in the talent book and things. How do you link them up to challenge them? Then you add speed, you know, you play with that to challenge who they're doing it against. There's loads of ways. Lovely stuff. So I can see, you know, I'm really satisfied that our riders must be getting well, not right now, but must be getting a pretty good experience if this is the way that we're thinking they're challenging. So really keen to see, you know, any feedback in the chat. You know, this first time we've done this kind of activity on one of these sessions, but one of the things I will do is you can download these as a PDF. So I've neaten it up, tied it all up, and download it as a PDF, and then just share it with you, and you can take it away to your club and coaching practice. So we're going to go into a breakout room, because what I want you to think about now. Sorry, and I'm just going to click onto a new share. One sec. And that is live, by the way. I'm not going to close that for the time being. Please don't go and delete, obviously, anybody else's comments. But if you go away after tonight and think about something that's really, really useful, then you know, you think of a great skill or a way to make it easier, pop back on, put it on, because I can just take it out as a PDF and show other people. So we're going to go into a breakout now. So this is where I think a lot of the value really is in these sessions. So to go into small breakout rooms and discuss what's on the screen. So if you could take a picture of the questions there. If you were on the Ignite monthly webinar last week, there were some issues in the breakout rooms in that we kind of flicked the questions on screen and then took them down, and some people were a bit confused about what they want to do. Now, there's not going to be a facilitator in every session. Jack will be in one session. We've got some of the BC members of staff and the tutors on there, but you're not going to have some in the session. So if you are the first person in the alphabet, if you could be the facilitator, just make sure everybody gets a bit of time to speak. Make sure you're asking questions to other coaches in the group. If you want to share details so you can carry on the conversation afterwards, please do. It's up to you. But so they're the three questions. So what are the implications for you as a coach? What we've talked about tonight, you know, what does it mean for your practice? How is this going to challenge you? How is this going to change how you approach anything with the club? It might not be changing you, but think about any other coaches at your clubs or any coaches you know, about how you can, you know, kind of pass it on. You know, how will you embed these ideas in practice? So taking away, like having all the ideas on a flip chart now is absolutely fine, but how are we going to do it actually in practice? And what do you think the benefit's going to be? You know, what would the benefit be if we were making sure that we're challenging all the riders appropriately? Okay, so we've got still a few people here, which is great to see. And we're going to go into groups of 4, 4 to 5 per room. I'm going to open them. So when it pops up now, go away, join the room, and enjoy the conversation. So hopefully you should have something that says join room. Fire away. Come on, Danielle, last one. Are you all right, Danielle? I've just asked you to unmute. So Danielle, I'm just going to move you to a different room to see if that helps. Does it bring up the option again to join the room? No. Right, I'm going to go off. Hopefully, Danielle, you can join a room soon, and I'll see you in one.
Get more inclusive for the riders and get more of the riders' input to what I'm doing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'd agree with that. Same for me. So a lot of the time, I try not to say this is what I think, because you don't just want them to learn the skill. You want them to learn.
The game will be.
Yeah.
Hello. How are we doing?
Just sorting technical issues.
Yeah, I think a few people have dived out of not being able to make the breakout room. Sorry, don't let me jump into your conversation. I'm just here to kind of listen in and join in.
I'll start off if you want. Let me just get the questions up. So I suppose for me, what are the implications for me? So I work with Northwest Cycle Coaching based in Preston. We're not a club explicitly, but we cater for clubs in the area, to riders to us. And I suppose for us, we've already planned our sessions pre in advance. So we do a 6-week rota block. I suppose for us, it's the case we always try to challenge of going away and thinking of new ideas. So we always have the same sort of skills, but being more creative. So I guess really even the Jamboard stuff is to go away and just like, yeah, we can come up with different ideas, but actually just throw more random ones out there and maybe even get like perhaps even parents involved, stuff like that. I guess that leads on to embedding ideas in practice pretty much that way, but also I suppose with the older riders, the under 16, the under 14s, we may even get them involved. Sometimes we sort of find midway through the session it's getting a bit easy, so actually we might get them to come up with ideas. I think that's always a good one, because sometimes you get the odd rider that comes up with a really wacky idea, but you say, go on then, give it a go, because you know it's probably not going to work, but let them try. Yeah, and that kind of answers number 3 as well. How would it benefit you and your riders? I guess it's that two-way conversation, being open and honest, and sort of go, okay, I've done my bit, what have you got?
It's a really powerful teaching tool as well. Just a bit of insight. I remember a few years ago, I'm not sure how long ago it was, that we engaged Street Games, and we're looking at kind of a street award for cycling to kind of go into doorstep coaching, and we got some kids from the street who weren't cyclists paired up with the National Youth Forum, so people who keenly involved in cycle, been involved with club cycling for a while, 16 years old, and they looked at it as a racing tool, and these kids from the street looked at it in an entirely different way, like thinking about how just as a tool to do some balancing on, just riding backwards and jumping off it and things, and it was it really, I think it really challenged the others about how they actually look at a bike. But that's where you get that real value, like you said, about them just coming up with some wacky ideas. I think that's a great show. John?
Okay. Yeah.
Where are you from, John?
I'm from Charlotteville Rascals down in Guildford. So we're a club, like the youth arm of the local cycling club. I've been coaching with them for 6 years, I think. Yeah, and I think it's really useful. I guess I've been conscious of the idea that we want, where we want to, what level we want to be at in terms of the coaching we do, but never really sort of formalised it, I suppose. But so that's kind of useful in terms of the zone of proximal development. I've never heard that term before, so that's quite useful to understand that. And then the idea of these this continuum and the challenge points, like going through on the whiteboard thing, that was really useful actually. We never really do that. We just sort of follow what's in the coaching manuals and just try to devise different ways of doing the coaching, but never really having thought through, I guess, the sort of what makes it easier and what makes it harder, and how making it harder challenges the older kids. What we have, I guess, most clubs with the young kids, we kind of struggle with them because they're obviously very challenged with the actual development and learning the techniques. And then with the older kids, I think that's where we start to struggle with the boredom aspect, and they get switched off when we're doing the same old thing every week. And we don't have the greatest facilities in terms of sort of a cycle track or anything like that. We just use the local school playground and a little bit of wasteland in Woking. Not wasteland, but sort of communal parkland.
Yeah.
And trying to make something that's really stimulating for them out of that is always a challenge. But so it just generally revolves around making the course different every week. But trying to bring in a bit more challenging stuff around making things harder, and going through a process before the sessions, maybe with the other coaches, to do a similar sort of thing, brainstorming with the whiteboards to come up with ideas. I think that would be really useful. And we could, as David was saying, we could involve the older riders in that process as well and get them thinking about what they'd like to be doing.
How would you approach that? I'm just thinking about saying taking this, conversation offline into your club. Like, what would be your thoughts now for trying to move forward with it?
Yeah, well, under normal sort of circumstances, we'd have a monthly get together of the coaches, generally going through sort of admin stuff, but we could bring it in the sort of the development aspects as well, and how we're going to. That's one of the constant concerns, is how we keep the older kids engaged, because we get quite a big drop off once they get to 14, 15, because then a lot of them are not going to move on to along the pathway much further than they have, and trying to keep them involved. So we could do it under normal circumstances at those meetings, and just have a sort of a bit of a brainstorming session for a particular, a particular skill set or set of skills that we're focusing for that particular period of time.
Yeah, John, I was interested in what you just said there about you felt you had a lot of riders who you didn't think were going to move along the pathway. Was that, do you mean in terms of that British Cycling Elite End? Because surely riders can still see a progression for them in terms of moving up from where they are, at least improving, or do you think that if they think they're not going to be professional riders, that's it, they're not interested anymore?
No, I don't think it's necessarily not going to be professional riders, but some people, I think they've got as far as they can with the club, and obviously some of our riders do take up the RSR, go as far as the RSRs and race at national level and that sort of thing. But the majority, I don't think, really perceive themselves as having a long-term. Well, maybe it's not quite the right thing. But hopefully they're going to have a lifelong engagement with cycling, but maybe not going. It's elite level sport or competitive level. So it's more my point of view, I think we want to try to keep people engaged in cycling, and whether they're competing or not, really. Not everybody in this club does compete at any level, so they just do it because they enjoy the cycling.
Yeah, so I had sort of used the past is sort of when they get sort of 14, 15, 16, sometimes get them involved with the coaching side, get them involved with the volunteering side, because obviously we're lacking that anyway in the sport, and if they're starting to drop off or ask if they're interested in supporting, turning up 10 minutes earlier if they're riding a session to help set it up. That's how I started. It's not going to suit every rider. You'll get some that would go, no thanks, but you might get one or two that actually go, yeah, you know what, that's quite interesting for me. It gives them a new lease of life in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good question from Mark, and really good discussion as well. Just so you feel like you're not alone, John, this is regular feedback that we get at all. For club sellers, it's starting from 12 years old now, which is such a shame. But again, it goes, for me, I think it goes back to a bit of a sales pitch about what cycling is, and I think British cycling, probably historically, just who we are and where we've come from. The national governing body of cycling, typically concerned with the sport. It was only really around about 2008 that we started diversifying into things like recreation and participation, away from that. So we've always been sport orientated. So our club structures and our coaching structures and everything like that has been sport orientated. But it's almost like, a penny drop moment. I don't know if you've seen the launch of the new Sport England strategy today, which, it's all about inclusion and participation and making sure people have the right pathways to them. How do we sell cycling, as the adventure, as the freedom, as the way to get to work, as your social mobility, those kind of things. And I think that's where we need to start change, you know, and that messaging can't happen at 16 when they're thinking about dropping out the club, or 40. It needs to start earlier, like clubs taking the kids on an adventure. Why don't you to have a ride with your friends this week and go on a little adventure and tell us next week what you found. Do you know what I mean? Like those kind of things, and that can be related to finding that challenge point and what they actually need to develop and stick with the club.
Yeah.
Do you have any further thoughts, Mark? I thought that was a really good question.
Oh, in terms of the dropout side of things.
Well, did just do the session tonight, or implications for coaching?
Yeah, what I do a lot of cyclocross coaching, so and a lot of riders at sort of top end of regional and national level. So a lot of this is very important. And I haven't done the sort of, I think I might take away that idea of increasing the pressure in terms of noise and so on. So record some crowd noise and play it back at them, something like that. Because at the national championships, there are a fair number of spectators making a fair bit of noise, even at national trophies. So I think that'll be a useful one to take away. Something I do quite a bit of is, when I run regional sessions, is taking up a section of course, a section of just a climb or a descent or something, and just throwing a few cones down to challenge riders to make it slightly harder all the time. Just challenge them that once they can do the climb in one way, then just push it a little bit harder and say, well, you've got to come into it at this angle instead of that straight on fast line and so on. So yeah, that's something I do quite a lot of. And so just even if you think you've got a course that will work, it's worth having a few extra markers in your pack that you can then chuck down to make things a little bit harder all the time. So
Mark, I'm really pleased with that, because obviously you're vastly experienced, and to have taken something away, just that little nugget to go away with is is great to hear. And honestly, I thought some of the ideas on that coming through on that Jamboard were brilliant.
Oh, definitely, yeah. There's always, if you're standing still, you're going backwards. So I always want to listen to new ideas from whoever.
Yeah. Is it Dave? Did you say you were a BMX club? Were you based in Preston?
So,
Preston Pirates. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Northwest Cycle Coaching is the group that I work with. They primarily focus on road, but we also do S&C in the winter with some of the slightly older riders, because they're just looking to progress to that next level. So we just try to diversify what we offer.
Okay.
It's not serious S&C. It's more with the younger riders, it's just body weight, and then with slightly older riders, we start to include some of the lightweight things like that.
Yeah.
Also around injury prevention, things like that. Just sort of try and give it an education package. Yeah,
that sounds absolutely great. And what you've just talked about is essentially a continuum of like kind of making things easier, like, or harder, like lifting body weight and stuff like that. That sounds great. So Northwest Cycle Coach, and I'll look out for you guys. I missed what you said at the start, so I didn't know if you were Preston Pirates.
We're normally based at UCLan Sports Arena or Preston Arena, some people know it locally.
Okay, yeah. I know the area well. Oh, fab. So look, we'll go back to the main session. I'm just going to close the breakout rooms. You don't have to leave straight away. Can I volunteer anybody just to give a kind of summary of kind of this session? What the is anybody up for that? I don't mind doing it. I'm just don't want everybody to hear my voice for the entire time.
I can do it if you want.
Yeah, if that's all right. Just summary of the discussion. So we'll head back and we'll wrap up. But lovely to meet you guys. And I guess I'll say it on the group, but do head onto Facebook and join the conversation and keep it going on there. I think the issues that you've talked about with some of the riders is other people are going through it, and collectively we can come up with some solutions to that. So. Hope it's been of use, this little session.
Thanks.
Oh, John, is Derek Dowden still involved with Charlottesville?
Who?
Derek Dowden, is he still involved with Charlottesville?
I don't know the name. He's not associated with the Rascals, which is the youth arm.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody, to the main room. I'm going to, and you might want to do the same, I'm going to put on gallery view. I think there's enough of us to hopefully fit on one screen, but we'll see. So hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. I don't know. I think it'd be worth just going around the houses and hearing from the different rooms. So I just need to pull up the breakout rooms to pick on somebody from each room. If you don't want to speak, do just pass the baton on. I don't mind, but hopefully you're all coaches. You're used to being in front of a crowd and things. So I guess firstly, Jack, let's go to yourself. So Jack, what did you? What were some of the key themes coming out of your room? What were you discussing?
Well, we had a bit of a split between road and track and mountain bike coaches. So we found some good middle ground of convincing riders that they need to work on certain stuff. So they, especially technique based. For my example was convincing riders that they need to still go back and do the flat pedal and the core basic stuff. And it's how you kind of get that buy-in from the riders to convince them that that is what's going to help them do the really hard, more technical stuff that they want to do. So we just had a really good discussion about ways and means of doing that.
Great
Do you want
stuff.
some of those ways and means?
Pardon?
Do you want some of those ways and means?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, and please, just for everybody else, please share ideas in the chat. You know, if something's coming out of your room, you feel like that was a good idea, that really resonated with me. Pop it in the chat so everybody can see it. So yeah, go on, give us some of those ways and means, Jack.
Okay, so there's a few different ones. So firstly, it's like using video cameras to show the rider what they look like. I find a good way is to try and get them to explain. So for me, say, okay, what was your body position like? How was your leg? Where was your leg in position? Explain that to them and then show them what they look like, because there's often quite a big difference between what they think they look like and what they actually look like. Another was, say, time in a certain section. So they have a tangible thing of to see improvement. You know, I would knock 2 seconds off my time here and there, etc. And then I think the third one would be like focusing in on a certain smaller element that you can convince them of the process, or break it down and then build it back up. And then they'll take that away to work on the wider picture that you want them to. I think that was it.
That's good. Skill acquisition theory there, whole part whole. Thinking about that, breaking it down, putting it all together and things. Love it. Great stuff. So yeah, I did just on that shout about tech, absolutely good shout. Just put in the chat if anybody's using anything, do share so the coaches can find out about it. Just worth saying as well that coaches, videoing yourself coach is a really powerful development tool. I think there's some stats out there that around about 80% of coaches can't accurately recall their coaching behaviors. So always worth turning the camera on yourself if you've got a friend who can film. So let's head to meeting room 1. So can I invite Debbie Capewell to speak, if you don't mind? Or you can wave your hands and go, not me, and pass on to someone else. No, you're okay. Good stuff.
Okay. We decided that we thought, you know, mixing the skills in with the sessions was really important. You know, kids like to compete, so I think it's important that they have their speedy time, if you like, but I think it's important to not neglect the skills. So balance, really, because it's, you know, there's both challenges on both parts really with the skills and the racing part of it. So, and you can use skills in warm-ups, warm-downs, middle of the sessions, recovery, you know, and I think it's really, you know, it's just you can do both.
Some really good points there. And just to flag conversation that was and we mentioned it before, kind of about dropout and things maybe becoming a bit boring because things are a little bit repetitive, and you know, there's various ways that you can challenge that. But like, yeah, I love that idea, you know, balancing the skill, you know, threading the skills throughout the session and challenging them in different ways, and thinking about those harder skills for the higher ability riders, or easing off for the lower ability. Great. So let's head to room 2. Can I invite Paul Glossop to speak?
Yep, let's move that one. So yeah, really quite useful discussion. Great to share some ideas with some of the other coaches on the call. What did we have? Go and see some coaches in other environments. We talked about a little bit about football, about climbing. So that you can see some good coaching practice in action, and maybe steal 1 or 2 ideas. So we had a few good ideas stolen across the session as well. So one of the things was that an event where there's a football goal happens to be around, so take a football and score some penalties from your bike. And that set us thinking about stealing or sharing ideas with other coaches really helps to broaden out your coaching experience. If you're in a small group of coaches in a club, you can kind of get stuck in a rut of the loop of things. You need to be really imaginative about how you're going to surprise your riders. And in one case, it was literally surprising the riders with having a blind corner and each lap putting something different around the back of the corner. So maybe there's a roll of tape sticking across the course, or a rider falling over, or I don't know, a pedestrian with a dog or something around the corner that people have got to be really alert on, to surprise, entertain, challenge the riders when they're getting in a bit of a, well, probably quite literally a rut going around that corner each time, to make it different and exciting for them.
So just some wonderful ideas there. I didn't mean to laugh. I just thought, yeah, great idea. And I think one of the things is that all coaches are magpies. We're all stealing different ideas from different coaches and putting it all together into our philosophy to work with the riders. Yeah, so go look at other sports, go and steal. There'll be loads of different clubs around you. I think that's really, really, really good shout. And then go back to your club and build your continuums and those challenges. Brilliant. Room 3, if I can invite Mandy Parker. Trying to see Mandy. Hello, Mandy.
Hiya. We talked about the challenges that were from different disciplines. So we've got track, cyclocross, road, various different disciplines. So we're talking about the challenges of your venue, like one who does coaching purely on the track, and everyone that comes to them initially in the club is a beginner. So they're all starting from the same skill set, but also how important it is to encourage the riders to do different disciplines, because as they go along, those that have done more disciplines end up being more skilled on the track because they're able to do a lot more of the advanced stuff. We're also talking about that you need the skills as well as the racing together. And also that the riders the older ones just want to get out there and ride really, really fast. And ideas about how to slow them down, like, doing jailbreak, bike sumo, let them have a mad 15 minutes and then they can slow down and actually start to learn skills. So we're talking more about all our different places where we coach and the different disciplines that we've coached. So it was just a getting together chat really about how we face difficulties in our different environments. Some people have got scrappy parts of ground and they can only coach skills, they can't do any racing, but it's almost looking at the environment first and what can you do with that to then do the skills. You can't do everything if you're in a restricted environment.
That was also discussed on our group as well, with John at Charlottesville Rascals. He said, yeah, limited space, no fancy facility nearby, and that presents challenges. But the idea of kind of the Jamboard and finding that challenge point involving like 14, 16-year-olds and creating some of those challenges is one way you can maybe start to think differently about that space, which is so some really good points there. I don't know, does somebody live next to an F1 circuit or something? I'm not sure what that noise was. That was a bit of a surprise, but let's go to actually I'm just going to stick with room 3 because Helen Scott was in room 3, so obviously Paralympic athlete on the podium program. So just curious, just for a little bit of insight from GBCT, really, how do your coaches continue to challenge you, and how are you being challenged leading up to the Olympics this year?
I mean, obviously, my sort of background is mainly in track and on the Manchester Velodrome. And it's been really interesting to think about that actually today, Robbie, because obviously, when you get, I guess, onto the Great Britain cycling team, the more of the focus is on the physical improvement, because I guess the skill set is sort of assumed to be sort of at the right level. It's not always the case. So the different squads focus on different parts really. So you've got the endurance squads who often do Madison training, so practicing of like the hand slings and things like that, not quite at race pace, and then they'll add the motorbike in for, you know, that extra pressure element of riding under stress and fatigue. And then the sprinters, you know, I mean, what do they say to perfect a skill? You have to do it so many thousand times or something. You know, the amount of standing starts that are done, are videoed, are scrutinized. You know, even, you know, our top Jason Kenny, for example, you know, one of our best team sprinters in the world. You know, always practicing those skills, and the challenge comes from, I guess, you know, the time, how fast you're doing it, and how effective your pedaling is, and the torque that you're producing through sort of SRM power cranks. So it gets a little bit more sciencey and technical, but no doubt there's always some skill being worked on to produce more efficient bike riders, really.
I think it's, yeah, emphasize the point really well. I guess it's down to your discipline and kind of the environment in which you're racing. You know, look at that compared to what kind of Jack's teaching, what Jack says, where it's almost entirely skill based. You know, there is some physiological differences. So just really interesting to get that kind of insight. Thank you, Helen. So just a couple more. I'm enjoying the conversation. If there's anything you know hasn't been raised, it was discussed in your room, please do share it in the chat. It's that, you know, this is the opportunity to share ideas. And things. So let's go to who is room 4. So Gerard, can I bring in Gerard Broughton?
You can, yeah. I think the first thing that we talked about briefly was quite a lot of what we're talking about today, and about the zone of proximal development and continuums. There are other names for it, like progression in your session plans, in some ways, and all of those things sort of interlink into the coaching. We talked about where skills actually come in, with examples of riders who, particularly in the youth age ranges, where physical development can actually make them apparently good riders because they're fast and powerful, and actually they have their comeuppance when the kids who have had to fight their way through a peloton or beat their way down a mountain bike course behind lots of people, or get the dirt in the face on a cyclocross race. Suddenly when they get strong, they've got skills which the fast riders don't necessarily have. So it's understanding why we do it, and trying to help the riders understand that. We talked a little bit about revisiting skills, and I think, Helen, you mentioned about standing starts. In some ways there is, and again, I come from a sort of track background, there's no way to make starts they're the same thing. There are things you can put around the edges, but you can't, once you've got to a level, then you've got to really work very hard to develop that. And I suppose it's recognizing that practicing a skill, a high level skill, is still important, as well as developing it further, and practicing is a way of developing it. We also talked about involving riders, asking them what they wanted to do next and how they might develop. So actually engaging with the riders. I think that was probably mostly what we said, but if anybody else has got anything to add, John, Joanne, Lloyd.
Just over to Daniel Riley. Ben Swift is the best example of what Gerard is discussing. Him. Just expand on that, Daniel. Or not? She's not coming off mute. Never mind.
Doing a Zwift session at the moment, so she has to talk in between efforts.
Oh, she really? we'll leave that one then.
Sorry, I am here, Robbie. I couldn't get to the computer in time.
No worries.
So many years ago, I rode the track league when Ben was about 10, 11 years old, and he was so tiny, but he used those skills that Gerard's discussing. He became really, really skillful, and then he developed into a big, strong rider, and he ends up as a world-class athlete. because his skills were so good from fighting for the positions when he was tiny. And I always think of little Ben when I see him in the big World Tour sprints, and you know, we'd think he wasn't there at the finish, and the next thing he'd appear, and he just learned so much and put into practice what he could. So he learned the skills, and then when he got the power as well, he was unbeatable.
One example of that, which I have from the track, is the youth omnium, and one of our girls, when she was a youth B, qualified for the finals and went off to, I think it was Wolverhampton or wherever, to do the omnium final. And bless her, she was placed 24th out of 24 in 4 of the 5 events. And obviously Sports City is a track-based club. We practice things like elimination races quite a lot. In the elimination race in the omnium, she came 8th. That wasn't because she was faster, more powerful or stronger. It was entirely because she had the skills and the tactics and the riding. And it was such a light bulb moment for me that I still quote it. And she's about 18 or 19 now. So, but that was our example.
And what you're talking about there, you know, regarding Ben Swift and that, you know, that athlete, this is backed up by research. You know, there's actual, you know, rationale behind it that, you, like you say, if you're smaller and you're having to scrap, you know, I think in elite sport, the majority, I think it's right, you know, more than 60% of athletes are a second or third child. And there's some really interesting. I'm trying to think of what the book you know, that has those figures in, where it's because they've had to scrap with somebody older, and you know and they, you know, when they get that develop, they're better. So really interesting that. So thank you. Let's just head to I guess
some positive feedback on that from second child who was just down the room there saying yes, that's absolutely true.
They're the best. Second the best. That's right. Just bringing David Redmond to feedback on some of the discussion in our group, and I just want to so we're going to close in a few minutes, but Jack Humphreys is still here, obviously talent coach. So if you've got any burning questions for Jack, this is the opportunity to do a Q&A and, you know, just ask questions about how you might be able to challenge some riders. If you don't have any questions, no problem at all. We'll finish up shortly. But yeah, still, please think about your questions. So David, in my room. So what was some of the conversations that I haven't covered yet?
So yeah, I mean, majority of what we've already spoken about, but I suppose the main thing to add on is the challenge of catering for all the riders, no matter what it is they're looking to achieve. So we mentioned towards the end about the focus of perhaps we're focusing too much on within the club, and actually perhaps challenging the riders to go away and explore cycling outside of the club environment. So you mentioned about just challenging a group of lads or girls to say, right, midweek, go for a ride, go for a venture and tell us about it. And it's just expanding it beyond the club. And then I thought, well, perhaps, if you're struggling with your riders towards the upper age groups, youth B, A, and they're not really in that competition, perhaps suggest them to go in towards the volunteering side of the sport. It may not suit everybody. You may get some riders that would just walk away. That's fine. But you may get some that actually, you know what, like myself, I suppose, reflecting back on me and how I developed, that they go, actually, yes, no, I want to learn a bit more about that. I want to challenge myself, but in a new way. And at the end of the day, they're still going to be learning those new skills because they're on the other end of the spectrum. So they're not the participant, they're the coach. So the best acronym I can use is like, once you've learned to drive a car, somebody asks you how to change gear, sometimes you have to think about it. I said, right, I've got to put the clutch down, change gear, gas, yeah, you're struggling now, but you get the point I'm trying to make. And it's just about, I suppose, if I could sum it up in one word, understanding your participants' needs and understanding that not every one of them is going to want to go on to be the next best rider. Some of them may actually have other aspirations that they may not even thought of yet. And it's just sort of giving them opportunities and challenging them in ways that perhaps not necessarily always on the bike, but also off the bike.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation. You know, kind of looking at the bikers. You know, we typically in clubs and coaching we tend to think about sport, but for cycling is sport for quite a small number of people, actually. When you look at, say, the British Cycling membership of 180,000, only 30,000 are race license holders, and only 48% are interested in one of the membership surveys said they were interested in sport and watching professional sport. So it gives you an indicator, for a lot of people, particularly for myself, the bike's about adventure and freedom and utility and things. I didn't grow up with a cycling club near me in West Cumbria. It was always about adventure, getting to the lakes in the summer, and things like that. And I think just selling the cycling dream, as it were, but giving them those pathways as well. So something I'm not sure how many people are aware, like Danielle Riley's on the call. She's a coach at Manchester Cycling Academy, New College Cycling Academy. We've just opened conversations with 6 cycling academies across the country. That's they're essentially performance programs for 16 to 18-year-olds to do some studying alongside training as an athlete. And so this is kind of an emerging thing over the past few years, but something we're hoping to support, so riders feel like there's still an opportunity for them to continue learning and riding. Just something to put on your radar. That exists now without any British cycling support. We're looking at how we can better support that as a model. So right, I think that's everything from me. Do put your hand up. Appreciate we're getting on, probably all tired. It's Tuesday. It's that tired. Is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? I'm not sure what day. Lost myself there. So any questions for Jack? Put your hand up or stick them in the chat. I don't think I've seen anything coming in. Or if it's not a question for Jack, if anybody just wants to chip in anything else now, take yourself off mic, off mute, sorry, and ask away.
I'll say something, might as well.
Go on, Joe. Good stuff.
The one thing that I mentioned about in our session was that we're talking about like repeating skills. Sometimes as a coach, you think, oh, why am I doing like X, Y, Z skill again and again? But actually, if you're coaching those riders who are, kind of teenage riders, they are still growing. They don't know where the ends of their arms and their legs are. I use the example of like you're kicking a football. I know we're not football coaches, but you kick a football. One week you know where the end of your foot is. You might grow an inch, and then you don't know where the end of your foot is, where the end of your foot is. So where you think you're kicking it isn't going to be where it's going to end up. So actually redoing those things isn't necessarily a bad thing for those riders, because they actually might not be able to do it in the same way that they expected to if you're not constantly like looking back at them as well. As much as it might not be the most interesting thing for us, it could be helpful for the riders to kind of continue to do stuff.
The important thing there is such an important point. I love that you made that. The important thing there is kind of the education for the rider and education for the parent as well. I'll just share a little anecdote, and this it's not a brag, but it might sound like this. So like I say, I used to coach at a football academy, and there was a young lad under 12s, brilliant. He come from Man United, been released by Man United. Came in and absolutely brilliant. And the first half of his first full season with me at under 12, he scored about 17 goals. Just absolutely banging them in for fun. Second half of the season, couldn't hit a barn door, couldn't do anything. And he looked at her after a couple of sessions. What's going on here? And you speak to his dad. He's like, anything going on at home, anything like that? He's like, no. He's like, look at it, and you go, he's growing. He's having a growth spurt. It just looked like Bambi, legs all over the place, can't kick the ball properly, and then, my seniors at the academy started asking me about him, like, do we need to release him and things like that? Absolutely, football's an absolutely horrible environment like that. It's really, really cutthroat. I said, no, just like stick with him. He's having a growth spurt. He's still, still a talented lad. Dad's pulling his hair out, thinking he's going to be released. We stuck with him, and 3 years later, he's actually just last summer he's been signed by Brighton for 175 grand. So he's moved on. So like it's really important. So his dad, the coach is above, and you need somebody to recognise they're having a growth spurt and they're suffering a challenge. Just really important point. Thanks, Mandy. Were you putting thumbs up as was that your hands up or thumbs up to the point that Joe was making?
No, I was agreeing with
cool.
The lads going through the growth spurt, and suddenly they become Bambi on ice. So we've had quite a few riders. Rob Scott came to our club as a teenager, and he was incredibly powerful, as evidenced by the fact he's a pro rider now. But my goodness, he couldn't corner to save his life. And when he was growing, he was even worse. And so he didn't do very well. And then suddenly he grew, he finished growing. He's not the tallest in the world, but he finished growing. And that's when he was really able to improve his skills. And I just call them Bambi on ice. It makes them laugh. it makes them less conscious of the fact that they are suddenly underperforming. And it's happened to the best riders who are riding professional now. I've seen them come through that stage, and suddenly they're on rollers and they're falling off the rollers, whereas before they could throw balls at each other, because we used to do okie dokie on the rollers and throw balls and bottles at each other and take jackets off. And suddenly they were falling off every 5 seconds, and they're saying, why am I falling off? I should be able to do this. I've done this for years. And I said, you're growing. Your arms don't know where they should be. Your brain doesn't know where your arms are. It doesn't know where it doesn't know where the end of your arms are, where the end of your feet are, because they've suddenly grown 4 inches. So I was agreeing. Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. No, it is, again, such an important point. I think one of the things is recognizing when that's happening, making sure it might only manifest itself in certain skills. It might be harder if, kind of they're always racing in a bunch and things, but then recognizing where, thinking about the zones of proximal development, where is their challenge point in that? So it might just be going right back down to the basics. Your neural pathways have changed. You've got to start thinking about almost kind of relearning the skills, and it will always come back. The body just needs to adjust, but just easing off when you see those things. Mandy, go on.
Yeah. The other thing is about when you were talking about Ben Swift, who held the hill climb record at the Keighley School until Mason Holliman broke it. And Mason was absolutely tiny. He was so small at an under 16. He was the size of a 10-year-old. And he nearly gave up. He so nearly gave up, but he didn't. He kept going. And then suddenly at 17 and a half, he grew. By 20, he's racing abroad. So you've got to encourage the kids who aren't growing as fast as the others. Don't worry about it. You will get there in the end. If you've got the effort, put the effort in it, and you've got enough talent. You don't need total talent, but enough talent. Sheer determination got Mason Holliman through it.
I think that's a nice feel-good story to end on. I think I'm just really mindful of everybody's time. So I think we'll close it there. But like I just said in the chat, if you enjoyed tonight, please do share on Twitter. It's always good to shout about these things, and hopefully we get a bigger community grown together. And you'll also see from the email today that we've started British Cycling Coaches Network on Facebook. Perhaps not the ideal platform for everybody, but it was recommended by our social media manager as the best to kind of grow a community and enable people to share. So if you haven't joined already, please do join that. Keep the conversation going, share resources, share videos and things. And just to say to Lloyd there, really appreciate the kind words. I'm glad these webinars have been well received. People are enjoying them, but always keen to hear if you've got any suggestions for improving. Just email education@British Cycling. I'll pick it up and we'll go from there. But wonderful to see you all again. We're becoming quite a community together, and I'm pleased that the conversations are going on. But stay safe, stay sanitized, and we'll see you at the next one. I'll see you on Facebook. And special thanks to Jack for supporting tonight. Absolutely brilliant to have you, Jack. All the best.
Right. Thanks, Rudy. Bye.
Cheers, Robbie. It's good to be here.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.